Welcome, everybody, to the Kona Shane Veterinary Podcast. I am your host, DrAndyRoark. Guys, I have my dear friend, the one and only Jamie Holms, on the podcast today. We've done a couple episodes together. She is a reader and a deep thinker, and every now and then, when I write some things that sort of speak to her and she wants to sort of unpack them some more, she'll reach out and be like, hey, how about I interview you on the podcast? And that's what happened today. And so anyway, we're talking about one of my recent articles called Back to Reality. It is all about sort of trying to figure out what to accept because it's out of our control and what to not accept because we do have more influence than we think. And how do you parse those things apart, and how do you know when to lean in and how do you know when to lean back? And so that's what we talk about. This is man, I love this conversation. I love talking to Jamie. I hope it'll be an interesting conversation for you guys. I always love thinking about these things and trying to figure out when the chaos comes, how do I best use my emotional energy? And that's really what we get into. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into this episode.
This is your show. We're glad you're here. We want to help you in your veterinary career. Welcome to the Cone of Shame with Dr. Andy Roark.
Welcome to the podcast, Jamie Holmes. How are you?
I'm really good, Andy. I'm so excited to be here and maybe creep you out a little bit about how I backstock on your articles to see if they still hold up.
Oh, no. Oh, no. You, for those who don't know you, you are an RVT. You are employee number one at DrAndyRoark.com and the Uncharted Veterinary Conference.
That's right. We don't even count you.
No, I'm not an employee. I have yet to set up payroll for myself.
It's true.
It's true.
Sometimes I worry that we don't pay you and you're going to leave.
Yeah, no, I just hang around. This is a hobby. Like as soon as I get paid, then it won't be it'll be work.
Anymore.
Then then it'll be work. So yeah, yep. No. You and I we've been together a long time, Jamie Holmes.
We have.
The last time you were on the podcast was episode 100. And it was episode 100, and it was the stories we tell ourselves matter.
Oh,
and that's what we were talking about. And I looked back at it, and I was like, oh. And so anyway, it's been a minute, but as you say, you do like to backstock the articles that I write.
do.
And you and I we discuss these things and sort of get into what does this mean and kind of philosophically what is going on in our profession. And so anyway, I thought we were probably due for one of those, and you said, I got something I would like to talk to you about. And so I thought I would just bring you on and kind of open it up and let's talk about what's on your mind.
That's perfect. I was reading the article that you wrote, Back to Reality, for today's veterinary business. And there are some things in there that really hit me. And I was talking to my dad about them because we've been talking a lot about agency recently. Okay. And that's kind of what this is about. And so one of the things that you said, that your brother said to you, and I also didn't like it, is you have zero power in this situation.
Oh, yeah. So I had to go look at this article. I'll be honest. I was like, you were like, I'm going to talk to your Back to Reality article. And I'm like, I have no idea what I said in that article. So it's a little bit of a deep cut. And I'll link it in the show notes for sure. But it's funny I went and looked and I was like, oh, I remember this. It was when I got called for jury duty.
Yes.
And I had to go, and I was like really busy. We were trying to get one of our conferences off the ground, and it was not at a convenient time at all. And I got the jury summons, and I'm like, oh man, you got to be kidding me. And so I reached out to my brother, who's a lawyer, and I was like, what can I do? What can I do to not have to do this? And he was like, you have zero power here.
Yeah.
Zero power. He was like, just go and be nice and hope for the best, but you have zero control. And that, I did not want to hear that. I wanted to believe that I, through charisma or willpower or through financial strength, I'm like, who do I write a check to to get this week of my life back? And he's like, it does not work that way. That's not going to happen. You have no power. And it was just really, it struck me because of how rarely someone says to our face, you have no control over what's happening right now. But it hit me pretty hard, and I had to sit with that, and I kind of panicked, just to be like, I have no agency at all here.
that's such a extremely difficult place to be. And I think we find ourselves in that place in veterinary medicine so often, whether it's the volume of calls that are coming into the front desk, whether it's that the phone stopped ringing because the internet is out and our phones are linked to the internet and people can't get through, those kinds of things. And I specifically really related to the part where you talked about time taking a toll on your body and you not having any control over that. And as you know, I lost both of my knees during COVID. We've mourned them.
Yeah.
And I find myself really comparing myself to who I was 3 years ago and what I could do 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I find myself getting really stuck in those places and not doing everything that I can because I'm so focused on what I can't do.
Yeah.
And I think that we get into that headspace in vet med and in our practices when we're faced with these, whether it's just one emergency after another, whatever it might be, we'd really get stuck in those spaces.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to talk to you about some of the things that you do to put yourself in the right headspace and kind of like the day-to-day. How do you talk to yourself to like practice this? Because it's a muscle, right? You're having to flex this muscle.
It's okay. I don't know that I'm the best person to talk about this, Jamie, because it is I'll be honest. You write the book you need to read. And so I think that I've written numerous iterations of this article in different ways with different stories because I continue to battle it. It's funny you talk about losing your knees. I used to run a lot. I used to love it. And I like being outside and I like having this thing I could run with my dog and stuff like that. And man, I started, when I was probably 35 or so, I got my first sort of bout of plantar fasciitis and my feet hurt and I had to stop running for a while. And then I got it again later on. And I've just had a number of bouts of it. And like, I can't be a runner anymore. Like I used to be where I'm like, I'm going to go run 7 miles. Like that used to be, it was kind of my stress outlet. And I like to, I have found other things that I enjoy just as much. And that I get the same like mental health benefits and community benefits out of. And at the same time, when I see these people out, it's 70 degrees outside, gorgeous spring day, and there's some guy in his little shorts running, you know what I mean? Like just running through, I'll be at the park with my kids and he's running past the waterfall and just, like the breeze and like, he's got like long hair and a beard. He's like who I never was, but always kind of thought like, man, if I could grow a beard and run shirtless like the wind, I would be somebody.
You were that guy.
I would be that guy, but I was never that guy. But anyway, when I see that guy today, it just bugs the hell out of me because I can't do that. I can't. I can do it for a little bit, and then my feet are going to explode, and then I'm going to be miserable, and it's not worth it. And so, even though there are alternatives that I have found, like I work out, I row, I walk, I do all these things that are great. Actually, I hike a lot, do all these things. But boy, when I see that and I go, I can't do that. That really, it still bothers me. I've gotten a lot better at it. But it has always been a battle. Well, I'll take that back. It has gotten to be a battle since I hit 40, 6 years ago.
Sure.
Because I was never 23. Like, boy, I remember back when I could do those things.
Yes,
like,
true.
That's definitely a later in life experience.
That's one of the things that I love about you is you always think that you're not the right person to talk about something because you're in the battle, but like I can relate to this. And so I know our listeners can relate to this. So let's backtrack just a little bit and let's go smaller because you like to dig in. So you talk about the importance of differentiating between what we control and what we can't in this article. I struggle with this sometimes, as you know, where I think I can control things that I can't. So how do you suggest that we find this distinction, especially in practice?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest challenges in life is figuring out how to differentiate where we have control and where we don't. I really think, and I think that as you go on in your life, you get better at making that distinction. But I think most of us, it's kind of this weird pendulum, right? It's this yin and the yang, because I really do believe, as far as being successful in life and being happy in life, the more that you believe you do have control over your circumstances, I think the happier you're going to be in most cases. I think people who say, yep, you know what? I'm going to put a smile on my face. I am going to manifest a good day. I am going to go out and I am going to make the world a better place. And I am going to make other people's days better. I think that is a healthy, really positive, really good place to come from. Most of the most successful people I know, they believe that they can make things happen. It's kind of like the professional athletes, the legends. They always wanted to have the ball at the end of the game because they believed that they could make the game change, that they could have this impact. And so I do think that we can have that. And I think that's important. But I think the paradox in life is it has its own challenges of taking this ownership, because then you end up holding yourself accountable for things that you're not accountable to. And so I think that's just, I think there's a lot of things in life that are sort of set up paradoxically, where the best case scenario is also an uncomfortable scenario. And the more comfortable you try to become, the less comfortable you're going to be in the long term. And so I think sort of taking ownership of our position is that way, where it's sort of like, man, in the short term, it would be really nice for me to go, I can't have power here. And so I'm just going to step back and let go. And over the course of your life, the more you say, you know what agency do I have here? And how do I use that agency? And insisting that I do have agency. One of the phrases I heard from a mentor years ago, like way back at the beginning of my career, I was working at this big practice and I really did not have any power, right? I was one of basically 30 doctors that were there. And it was a good place, but it was still, everybody chafes, right? And there's always something that you don't like. And I forget what the stupid thing was that I didn't like. But I felt like, I don't have any agency here because there's so many voices, there's so many people here. And so I said to one of my mentors, I was like, I don't have any power here. And he said, could you make life worse for the people around you? And I was like, oh yeah, of course I could. I absolutely could make their life worse. No doubt. And he was like, then great. Then you could clearly make their life better. If you could make it worse, you could make it better. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, then you have agency, and that whole idea of could I make things worse? If the answer is yes, that means I have some agency. And I mean, I can use that agency to do good. But for some reason, I don't know, that just clicked with me as far as sort of coming to believe that I do have this power. And so anyway, that's kind of where I started off with starting to wrestle with what power do we have.
I love that. That's something that I'm going to use in my life. And when I am struggling and be like, can I make this situation worse? Why, yes, I can.
Well, yes, I can. That means I could also make it. Yeah. I mean, exactly. I don't know why I rise to that, but I'm like, oh, buddy, I can get real creative right now. Like, you're like, how do you make this worse? I'm like, I will come up with some weird stuff you have not seen. I will make this worse in ways people have not anticipated. But why am I not so creative in coming up with ways to make it better? I don't know. But once I do the how do I make it worse exercise, it stretches my brain out. I'm like, oh, I do have power here. And then I can find a positive way. But that was super simple. But that just having it shown to me that way, for whatever reason, it just resonated with me. And so I'm like, oh, I do have agency. And then on the flip side, there was another piece of advice I heard much later in my career that kind of rocked me about how little control we have. And the saying is, there's three things we don't control: the past, the future, and other people. And I go, oh man, it seems paradoxical that I can convince myself I do have agency. I do have control. Also, not over the past, the future, or other people. But I think that there's it's this narrowing, right? It's this narrowing of focus of understanding where we don't have control and then figuring out the pressure points where we can put our finger and push and make a real difference. And like, if you're familiar with pressure points, you know that that applying a bit of pressure at a specific area on the human body can cause great pain. It can have great impact on that person. It's sort of the same thing of, boy, I can only push on these little areas, but if I push on the right area in the right way, I can have a huge impact. And so going back to the jury duty thing, and when you and I were talking about it, and he was like, you have no power in this situation. And he was right in that. I have no power over whether or not I'm put on this jury, over what hours I'm going to be there, over how long these trials are going to go, over whether if I get picked for a jury, 11 people are going to agree, or we're going to sit there for 2 days and not agree. I don't have any power over any of that. But I do have power over how I feel about it and how I behave. And do I go in and have a good attitude about it, or do I go in and just make myself miserable? Because one way or another, I'm going to do it. It's kind of that when it snows, you got two options, right? You can be miserable that it snowed, or you can be happy that it snowed. But either way, you're still dealing with the snow.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a lot of truth to that. So I don't know, how does that feel as far as sort of threading that needle?
Man, I love it. I think it's just it feels so simple to say, this is how you start getting agency back. Because I think that's one of the things that I struggle with, is so many times I hear, you don't have control over the situation. You only control how you react to it. And very often reaction is a thing that just happens inside of me, and I want to respond. And I don't know how to bridge that gap between reaction and response. And the only thing I know to do is to put distance, like space between the thing. And we don't always have that option, especially at work and in practice. The phones are ringing, people are walking through the door, and you've just gotta do this. And what a quick thing, just like, breathing exercises, is to ask yourself, like, can I make this worse? Great. How can I make it better?
Yeah.
And that's just so simple.
Hey guys, this is Duncan real quick here, and just let you know, I am looking for dynamic duos. I am looking for practice managers and practice owners that love working together, that want to work together more effectively, that want to develop ways of working, that want to develop strategies where they complement each other. And the reason I'm looking for those people is because we at Uncharted Veterinary Conference, where I work, have put together a conference for dynamic duos. We have our Practice Leader Summit. It is in Greenville, South Carolina. It is December 7th through the 9th. This is open only to practice owners and practice managers. Ideally, I love for those guys to come together, and we are going to have some work separately time, and then we're going to have some work together time, because man, that head down, coming together, work on our practice together time is so rare and so valuable. Anyway, I love it when people come in pairs, but if you're a practice owner and you say, I don't have a practice manager, or you're a practice manager and you're like, hey, the practice owner is not going to be up for it, or I don't have a practice owner, you are welcome to come along, and you are going to work with other practice managers, and you are going to learn a ton. So again, Practice Leader Summit, Greenville, South Carolina, December 7th through the 9th. It is a leadership summit. There's going to be a lot of interactivity, a lot of active work on your practice. I would love to see you there. I'll put a link to register in the show notes. Guys, let's get back into this episode. Well, going to the breathing exercises, you say that, and I don't want to I'm not a super woo-woo guy,
Sure.
but there is definitely some pieces of woo-woo that I'm like, it kind of works. There's a reason that, meditation has been around for 5,000 years.
For sure.
It does work. But the way I sort of think about that stuff is, and I think you're right, I think one of the real skills that we can acquire, and some people are wired this way where it's easier for them, like they're just naturally geared this way. Other people, it's a much bigger lift. But I love how you said that, like, when something happens that's out of my control, how do I create that space to get my head around it and be like, I don't control this, but I got to deal with it. But my control is very limited here. How do I create that space so I can get a clearer look at it and not feel steamrolled about it, not feel emotional about it, things like that? I really do think that is a skill that we can build. And I do think everybody's got to find their thing. I really don't. I've heard a million people be like, this is what you do. And I'm like, that doesn't work for me. And I found other things I go, this works. And I explain it to people and they'll blank look on their face like,
for sure.
But the ability to create space, as you said, I think that is Jedi skill level. It's the ability when the phones are ringing and there's a client in the room who is angry and you're going to have to deal with it, and the stupid CBC machine is just spitting out errors for reasons that make no sense at all. Can you create some space and say, what do I control here? And how do I exert my influence in the most productive way possible? And man, that is really the, that's enlightenment. That is the Zen master of vet medicine is, can you do that? And so, unfortunately, there's a lot of tools that help us get space if we have time. So, if we've got something, that's nagging at us. And so I talk sometimes, I try to be sort of open about this, but I talk about when my wife got cancer last year, and, I did a lot of walking. I did a lot of gardening. I did a lot of rowing on the rowing machine. I did a lot of stuff that I know helps me. I did a lot of painting. These things that I have found that are like, oh, I can get some space here. Like, this is how I kind of calm things down and get some space and some perspective. But you have to have a different set of tools for in the moment. And so for a long time, I did not have those in the moment tools. I still, like everybody, wrestle with them depending on what's going on. I got pretty good at those longer term space getters. I was good at going out and finding other things to do and exercise and stress management and stuff like that. But man, those in the moment things, they took a lot of time. I still work on it. I've come a long way with my, with getting centered, right? Some mindfulness stuff, some deep breaths, I focus on my knuckles. I don't know why. I focus on my knuckles. So there was this basketball coach, right? This legendary basketball coach, his name Phil Jackson, and he won 11 NBA titles. He coached Michael Jordan and the Bulls. He coached Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal at the Lakers, and he's won 11 NBA titles. And he's also a practicing Buddhist, which I think is interesting. But he's kind of an interesting guy. And so anyway, I heard him talking one time, and he was telling this story about the year 2000's basketball season. So he's coaching in the year 2000. And that's when, I don't know if you heard, there was a pandemic. And so there was a pandemic and everything kind of shut down. But the NBA was like, no, we're making money because that's what we do. And so we've got this pandemic thing. And so they took the entire league and put them in a hotel, basically. Like imagine like a Disney property. And there's a basketball court at this place.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Well, they went for it, right? They were not, you had to test and quarantine to go in.
Oh my gosh.
So people could not go. So these people were separated from their families for the NBA season. It was bonkers. It's a crazy experiment. You should just read about it, just to read about it. It's incredible. But they were like, we're going for it. And so all the journalists had to stay in. They couldn't come and go. If you went, they called it the bubble. If you went into the bubble, you were in the bubble. And so being in the bubble, according to Phil Jackson, had these really unique psychological challenges for the people who were there and the players. And they're seeing social media and there's all these things that are going on, and they're away from their family. And so keeping them focused and centered was really hard to getting them to play basketball. And so it was a simple thing that he did, but he had all of his players, they would all wear rubber bands around their wrists. That was it. And you're supposed to have your rubber band on. And so he would get them to wear rubber bands around their wrist. And the reason was that so that he could tell them to snap their bands. Or if you were working with somebody and you could tell they were zoned out, they were not present in what we were doing, you could reach over and pull their rubber band and let it go. So it smacked them. Right. And it was enough of a stimulus that it would focus you back on the moment. Like this thing smacks on your wrists and you feel that about a pain, it brings you sort of back to, oh, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm present. And so I never went as far as getting a rubber band for when chaos was going on all around me and I was being swept up in it. But for whatever reason, I would think about that rubber band. And I just found that if I stop and focus on my breathing, and there's something about if I just kind of make a fist and look at my knuckles and kind of just focus on them, that's just my thing. And I can kind of get centered and bring my thoughts back to where we are. And so anyway, we we bring our thoughts back like that. And so that's been key for me. The other thing that I didn't have in the toolbox when I wrote the article, but I find myself doing now, I have found that it's much easier when I'm in the moment and things are going crazy. If I can step back for 1 second and just get a piece of paper and I say, great, what questions do I need answers to? And if I can make a list of the questions I need answers to, that generally helps. It shifts me into a problem solving place that makes some sense. And so why is this person mad? What can I do in this moment to help her feel better? What are the next steps diagnostically if the CBC machine doesn't work? And that's naturally where people's minds go anyway. But I think a lot of us get stuck. We're stuck in the stress and we don't convert it to the action of this is what I'm going to do next. And for whatever reason, for me, asking those questions makes clear my options. Because once I have the questions, I can go, great. I don't have to answer these questions, but what do I need to do to find the answer to these questions? So what are my diagnostic options if the CBC machine continues not to work? I can huddle up the other doctors real quick and ask and get some insight on that. And so I don't have to know the answer, but I know where I can get the answer. And so now getting that answer becomes an action step of something that I can do. And it's converting that feeling of powerlessness into something that I actually have agency over. And that's been a tool in my toolbox recently of taking stress, taking chaos, converting it into a list of questions that I need to have answers to. And then not trying to answer the questions, but grouping them together and saying, great, what are, how am I going to get these answers? So for example, like here, let's just say that I came up with a list of 10 questions I need answers to. Well, I'm going to huddle the doctors up because I need some advice on what to do if I can get my CBC machine working. I'm also looking at my list. I could also ask the group of doctors 4 other questions that are on this list. And so now suddenly I'm calling a doctor huddle, and I'm like, guys, I got 4 questions that I need help with. Bang, 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 bang. And it's efficient and it's fast and I'm getting what I need. And now I'm back into having active control over the things that I can control over. So that's just like a shortcut that I've been using recently that I've just found. Again, everybody's got to find their own thing. But man, that really works for me.
Yeah, I love that. And it takes you from that emotional mindset, right? Because when we're feeling powerless, that's an emotion. We're really wrapped up in that. It changes everything happening in our brain. Our heart is going faster. And we're uncomfortable. And once we get that little piece of control back by switching to that logical mindset, by doing some creative problem solving and thinking that through, we've switched to that.
Well, I can go from anger or frustration to problem solving, right? Like that is a shift I can make. I have never been Zen enough, and I probably will never be Zen enough to go from anger to tranquility. Like I can't, but I can get around to tranquility if I'm like, I am frustrated. All right, great. I'm going to switch out. Let's start problem solving. What are the questions that we have? What are my questions? And I can make questions while I'm ticked off. I'm like, why is this woman the worst? And it's helpful. I can get over towards positivity that way. But it's almost like if you try to go directly from anger to tranquility, it's not going to happen. So I go from anger to problem solving, and then try to come back around into solutions, and then ultimately you can get to tranquility because you're actively working on the thing that you're working on. I heard some advice one time. Again, these are all just, I feel like I'm just pulling out different things that people said to me in my life. But for whatever reason, when you hear something that sticks, there's usually a reason for that. But I had a buddy, and one of his things was he would say, life is what you focus on. And I always thought that was really important as far as when you're in the clinic and there's just chaos all around you. If you focus on the chaos and believing there's chaos and being frustrated that there's chaos, then your life is chaos. Like, it's focused on chaos. It's centered on chaos. It's anchored to chaos. It's what it is. But if we can get our head around, I'm going to focus on where I have agency, then you have an empowered life. And so I can focus on the fact that I don't want to go to jury duty. I don't have time to go to jury duty. Like, honestly, when I got called for jury duty, my wife had just gotten her breast cancer diagnosis. And I'm like, man, are you kidding me? And like that was happening in the background.
Yeah.
And so I can focus on that, and my life can be fear and frustration, or I can say, you know what, this there's probably some good to this, because what ended up happening was I got called for one trial, and it lasted half of one day, and that was it. And basically, I had a week off at this time that my wife had her diagnosis. And it ended up being this really good thing. But boy, that was not my perception going in. But it just worked out that way. And it could have worked out differently. But, life is, what if you focus on optimism? What if you're like, I'm going to focus on what's good and what I can control. I'm going to focus on just being present and doing something different and getting my mind off of things that are going on elsewhere. I'm going to focus on the fact that I'm not in the clinic where things are crazy. I am instead just sitting in this jury box, listening to someone explain what happened in a traffic accident, and just like that's what I'm doing. And so anyway, it's life is what you focus on. I think is that has been really powerful for me.
I agree. I think that's incredible. When my dad and I were talking about agency, and he was a fire chief in Orange County, and he had a lot of things he had no control over, and we talked about how he helped himself find that agency. And he said creative problem solving was one of his number ones. And the second I thought was really interesting was that when he got into that problem solving, that same thing that you're talking about, that making lists, that it helped him flex his empathy and compassion. And then that just changed his perspectives.
Oh, interesting.
And so that he could go into a situation with like the board of supervisors, and they were making a decision that maybe wasn't the best thing in his opinion for public safety. And he could ask himself, like, what may make them make these decisions, or what might they be thinking about? And how can I appeal to them differently? Or, what are their concerns? What problems are they trying to solve? And I think about that a lot when we go into practice, and, we're sitting in there and we're talking to people, and the problem that we're trying to solve is probably not the problem that they're trying to solve. And, I think about that. I think about that a lot. And how do we get to the place where we find out what problems they're trying to solve so that we can help them get their agency back? Because I think that's what's happening when they're so angry, is that they feel like they also have no control in the situation. And how do we give them how do we give them some of that, their own agency back?
Yeah.
And I think that's a gift we can give them.
I really like that. I mean, because empathy is a huge problem-solving tool, right? We talk about dealing with angry people. We talk about, even working with the staff, working with teams, trying to assume good intent on the part of others. All of these things are skills that we know are effective, and that on our best days, we say, yes, this is how I handle this angry client. And so if I said, hey, what are the steps for dealing with an angry person? I'm sure I'd get a list of wonderful things from everybody involved. But of course you say, I'm going to try to hear this person. I'm going to try to assume good intent on this person. I'm going to remember that everyone's fighting a battle we don't know anything about. I'm going to try to empathize and sympathize and all of those things. And so if I can get from frustration into problem solving, and then problem solving says, okay, what are our tools to handle this? That gets me into empathy, assuming good intent.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I come back around to tranquility. So that's beautiful, Jamie. Hey, thanks so much for pushing to get together and talk about this.
This
I really
is great.
Appreciate you.
Thank you for doing this with me. This is like such good timing. I just had this conversation with my dad, so I love it.
Awesome. Well, thanks to everybody for listening. Take care of yourselves, everybody.
Bye.
And that's it. That's what I got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to Jamie for being here. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, please do me a favor and leave me an honest review wherever you get your podcasts, or share the episode with your friends. That's how people find us, those two ways. And so anyway, that's what it's all about. I want to help as many people as possible, and I kind of need you guys to sort of spread the word and let people know that we're over here doing it. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just talking into the void sometimes. But then people come up and say, hey, you said this thing, it was really helpful, and it all is worth it again. So anyway, that's all I ask. That's it. So anyway, gang, take care of yourselves. Be well. I'll talk to you later on.